and welcome to tonight's edition of At Home with the Four Indies. The Four Indies being the local bookshops around, which I'll go through later. But anyway, my name is Fern Britton, and today is a big day for me because my latest novel, novel number 9, it's called The Daughters of Cornwall, has been published, and I'm absolutely thrilled to bits with it. And this is such a thrill to be with you on Facebook Live. Forgive me if I look a bit rusty around the edges, only I'm just not quite used to all this technology, so I'm sorry. But thank you so much for joining and listening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my writing in the book, if that's all right. I am sitting in Cornwall, where I set all my books so far have been set in Cornwall because I just love the county. I'm not Cornish by some accident of birth, but I love the place, I love the people, and I love the smell of the air and the feeling of the sun and the sand between your toes and the sea. Sometimes in this room, I can just about hear the sea if it's a rough night, which is wonderful, particularly as I'm going deaf, sadly. Anyway, here we are in Cornwall, and it is my favourite place in the world. And I wonder where your favourite place in the world is. All of us have a place where our heart is. It might be Northumberland, it might be Venice, it might be South Africa, it might be County Kerry. But we know those places, don't we? But this is mine. And my new book, Daughters of Cornwall, is inspired by my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was an extraordinary woman. She was born in Mauritius to an army father there on a British army base. Her mother died when she was quite young. I don't think she had siblings. And her father married again, and she had quite a difficult time with her stepmother. But what I do know next is that as a teenager, or maybe into her 20s, say 18 to 20, something like that, she became pregnant and she wasn't married, and she had a little boy, and she must have done that in some seclusion and secrecy, without having a mother to turn to. And that little boy she had to give up to private fostering, but it was a family, I think, that she knew quite well, or that she at least approved of and liked, because she handed her little boy over, and we know that she wrote letters to him, including, or to the foster parents, saying, "Thank you for looking after him. I'm glad he's doing well. Um, I hope the £5 I've enclosed in this envelope will help keep him going." And so she helped financially, and she cared about him very, very much. But we discovered later that she married and suddenly had to cut off all knowledge of this little boy because her new husband, her first husband, was not to know that she'd already had a little boy. And in those days, of course, it was tremendous shame to have a baby out of wedlock. It was the woman's crime, while the man got away scot-free, innocent. And that little boy was brought up in a very loving home, and he did marry again, and he had his own family. He has now sadly died. My grandmother married. She had to my grandfather, obviously, and she had 3 children. She had an elder son, my uncle, and then my mother, and then another little boy, my other uncle. And she went to live in Penang, where my grandfather ran a rubber plantation, and they were there for a long time. This is in Malaya, when Malaya was Malaya, not Malaysia. But she brought my uncle and my mother back here to the UK and put them in a foster home too, because unfortunately Malaya was there was a lot of civil unrest and it was a bit dangerous for the children. So they decided to bring them back, leave them in the UK, and go back to Penang. And they left my mother and my oldest uncle. The youngest uncle wasn't born at that stage. Um, they went back to Penang and left my mother and my uncle here uh, in the UK. My mother said that the last thing her father said to her was, "See you later, old thing." And she waited by the window every night for a week, waiting for him to turn up, and he didn't. And they finally, her mother and her father, turned up 5 years later. They left her when she was 5 and her brother was 10, and they came back when she was 10 and her brother was 15. They were at school, funnily enough, in Port Isaac. If you've been watching Doc Martin, that's set at Port Isaac, and you will know there's the old schoolhouse up on the cliff looking down over the beach. Well, that was the school that they went to, but they were expelled. As tiny children, they were expelled because they couldn't speak English. They only spoke Malay and a little bit of Mandarin because that's all their parents spoke in Malay, because her parents didn't want the servants. That's a terrible word to say, but you will appreciate this is the time it was. They didn't want the servants to understand what they were talking about in English, which was often something to do with politics and local government. So the children couldn't speak English either. Not only that, they took their shoes off when they went indoors because that's what they were used to doing in Penang. So they were expelled. And they spent, I don't know how long, but probably a whole summer down on the beach in Port Isaac playing with the fishermen. This is a long and rambling way of saying that my grandmother's first son, the son she had to give away, we knew nothing about until 1980 when I was on television. My first job in television was in Westwood Television in Plymouth, in Devon. And a man wrote to me and said, "Oh, my wife and I have been on holiday in Cornwall. We saw you and we wonder, is your grandmother Beryl Hawkins?" So I wrote back, no emails in those days. I wrote back and said, "Oh, yes, you know." And he said, "Well, there's a bit of a surprise because I think I am your half uncle and your mother is my sister." Well, I had to write back to say, "Well, you'll have to tell me and prove this before I tell my mother." And he did. He sent a letter with photographs of my mother and him. He is a small little tot on the beach, and her with her arm round him, and with his foster parents, and letters in her own hand, you know, saying, "How's he getting on?" And "I've enclosed £5," and all of that. But she had to stop suddenly when she married my grandfather. And finding that story out, my uncle who arrived, he didn't he didn't know my grandmother at all. He was looking for her. Unfortunately, she died by then. He never knew who his father was because she covered her tracks so well. There's a birth certificate, but it's not the right information on it. And now that my uncle has died, my mother has died, my father died at Christmas, my grandmother, my grandfather, all that generation is now gone, sadly. But it was a story I wanted to tell because my grandmother was a wonderful woman, and if she'd been born 100 years later, she wouldn't have had to have given that son up. And I wanted her to know, she might be cross that I'm telling the secret, but I wanted her to know how amazing I think she was, because she did care about that little boy and wanted to keep him, but obviously couldn't. So I've fictionalized so much of this. She was the inspiration for the story, but I've fictionalized so much of this story in Daughters of Cornwall because nobody knows the real truth. She covered it up. So I'm going to read you a little bit, if you don't mind. How are we doing? Yes, time was okay. This is, I've introduced the person I thought she might, whom could have been the father of her baby, and I've called him Bertie. And he's a lovely man who did have a rubber plantation in Malaya, but he came back to the UK when he knew the First World War was brewing. And he has met, I call her Clara, he's met Clara in London, and they've developed a friendship, and he's starting to fall in love with her. And he's asked her while he's in France, would she mind writing to him? He wouldn't mind if it was just ordinary stuff about her day-to-day life, just to have a friendly letter from a woman he liked. Gradually, the letters got more and more loving. And as the war went on, it got worse and worse. This is a chapter of a letter that he's written her from the trenches. Bertie, France, 2nd of November, 1916. Dear Clara, I am unable to get any rest, and I have no time to write to you. Conditions here are so hellish that the mail bags with our precious letters from home cannot get through. I miss those letters so much. Clara, you have an ease of writing that makes me feel I am in whatever story you are recounting. I feel the pavement under your feet, the rattle of your bus to work, the sanctuary of our bed. When I get home, I shall marry you. I dare not propose with a letter, as I may not be able to fulfil my promise, things being as they are. I did almost propose to you, as I held you before putting you on the train from Lichfield back to London. I nearly asked you to wait for me, and that was all I could ask of you. I am sitting now, hunkered in a hole held up with wooden beams, a roof of tarpaulin and sandbags above my head. As an officer, I am allowed this privilege, and even have use of a lower bunk bed. There are 3 bunks crammed in here, and my cellmates are all good men, but tonight 2 of the mattresses will remain empty. At 14:45 today, or was it yesterday, we were engaged in hand-to-hand fighting with the enemy. A first for all of us. We charged a line of old gun pits, hoping to surprise the enemy, but naturally they retaliated with heavy machine gun fire. I killed 5 of them with my bayonet. I'm not proud of it. They were men with families, who in any other time of life might have been friends, but we are all soldiers, and we kill. When the horror had finished and the adrenaline subsided, I found an unseen place where I could be as sick as any dog. It had been our first attack against an enemy post rather than a trench line. At daybreak we counted the men we had lost. We had gained nothing. I have never known such terror. After that we were withdrawn from the front and marched along the muddy road to Amiens. We reached our billets and were given 10 days' rest. Rest! There was no rest. We refitted, reorganised and trained. 2 weeks later we were sent to the Belgian border to relieve the men who'd been working to strengthen our lines. The enemy welcomed us with a cruel bombardment as the relief was taking place. We had few casualties, thanks to a God whose existence I question, but all the good work done by our predecessors was blown apart. We got stuck in and began to rebuild our defences. It took us all the winter months to achieve. Compared to the Somme, we were grateful for the relative peace. Of course, we would send the enemy odd bouts of artillery fire at inconvenient times, and they would return the compliment. But in lots of ways it felt like a holiday. At least we weren't being shelled, and we began to get post again. Now, I wrote that because there are so many stories of the First World War and the Second World War, and I grew up with my grandfather, who my father's father actually, who fought in both wars. And in the First World War he went over the trench, top of the trench, and a bullet whistled past his head. I think it damaged his helmet and sort of knocked him out, but he came to and got back to safety. He also was enlisted during the Second World War, which is incredible, isn't it? And my mother was in the ATS, which is the Auxiliary Territorial Service, which is it was the beginning of the Women's Army, actually, the Women's Land Army. And she was trained on heavy ack guns, huge guns with enormous shells that they would shoot into the sky and knock out enemy aircraft. She was very good at it. She got her sergeant stripes and she's very proud of it. She joined up when she was 17 and a half. Can you imagine? I mean, you know, my sons are now 26, and when they were 17, there was no way they could have. Well, I suppose they would have, but you know what I'm saying. It's an incredible story. And her older brother, Uncle Paul, he flew Lancaster bombers. He was a pilot, and he won his Distinguished Flying Medal, bringing the plane and all the crew home safely, flying it sort of 200 feet across the channel to get home because engines were on fire, and he brought them home safely and saved their lives. And so I was brought up on those stories. And my mother used to say to me, "Who won the war?" And I'd always go, "You did, Mummy," because I didn't know the difference. But I was around those stories all the time. And nobody ever really talked about the death and the blood and the loss and the damage. No one talked about that. They would talk about, strangely, that it was one of the happiest times of their lives. but it wasn't. My Uncle Paul and his flying friends, when they weren't flying, they could easily drink a bottle of scotch a night because of the nerves. You know, he was, I suppose, 19 when he first learnt to fly and started sorties, and he did more sorties than was possible. I mean, they were, I can't remember what the number was, but, you know, people only had to fly a few sorties, and then they knew their number would be up. There was a maximum number that you would do, and you were, you know, shortening the odds of dying. But he managed it. And my grandfather, who stayed in Penang, he was taken in the Second World War. He was taken prisoner of war. He fought in the First World War too, but he was taken prisoner of war in the Second World War and was in Changi Jail in Singapore, um, which was pretty poor situation. And because he was an officer, he kept everybody the morale going and standards going, and they might have only had 1 cup of water a day and half a spoonful of rice, but you had to shave and wash in that water as well as boil your rice. So he made certain that the men kept their faces clean. I mean, he wasn't the only one. I'm just saying because I'm so proud of him. There were many, many, many people who did this, but to keep that spirit of, yes, we keep ourselves clean, we keep ourselves shaved, and we keep our dignity. And it was that sort of thing that made me want to write about the war. There are many people who've written wonderful books. There is, of course, Birdsong, Sebastian Faulks, which is incredible. Atonement, Ian McEwan, the most beautiful books. And so for a woman to write them, it might be a bit different, but I've tried to make it as romantic and accurate. No, that's not the right word. Authentic. I want you to be able to feel the emotions of both Bertie and Clara and what happened to them after the war, how the story moved on. So that's it. That's my book. And if I'm just having a look at the time, make sure I'm not over talking. But I've also been sent some lovely questions, and thank you for those. First of all, why do I write in Cornwall, and where does the love of my life, where does the love in my life for Cornwall come from? Well, when I was very little, my sister, my grandmother, and I, my Uncle Paul, his wife Auntie Elsie, who was also in the WAF, the Women's Air Force, and my 2 cousins, we'd get in 2 cars. There'd be an Austin A40, and my mother had a Triumph Herald. We'd all pack into those little cars, the 2 cars, drive for what felt like days on end, crossing Dartmoor in the fog. My mother would always say as we went past the Dartmoor prison, look out, there might be an escaped convict. And one year there actually was. They were stopping all the cars on going across Dartmoor because somebody had escaped. And my mother said to me, you see, if you were an escaped convict, the best thing would be to get into a car with a family looking as if you're going on holiday. That's the greatest way to escape. And so she was very good at stories. She'd get my imagination going. And also, there were times when you cross Dartmoor and the fog is rolling in, and you know, any fog on any moorland is thick. And she'd always talk about the headless horseman. The headless horseman was going to come and get us, and then we weren't allowed out of the car because we'd fall into a bog and get sucked into it. You know, all those wonderful stories. Anyway, we'd come down, and we'd usually stay in Looe or Polperro. You probably know them if you know Cornwall. Gorgeous fishing villages. I mean, someone once said to me, oh, it's just amber solaire and chips down there. Well, if it is, I like it. That's exactly what I like. And I used to do crab fishing on the quay. And I still take my children there, actually, even though the youngest is now 18. You know, they're grown up. But we still do that, have crab fishing expeditions and contests, of course, and fish and chips. So that was really where the love of Cornwall came. And then I was lucky enough to live down here in 1980, on my first job on television. And I did buy my first little house down here in Cornwall. And then life took me all around the place with my career. But now, finally, I am here for good. And I'm sitting in this dear little house in a very small village with wonderful people around us. Got a lot of farmland, a lot of farmers. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can get a nice lobster from somebody. And I'm got some very good girlfriends, and it's just fun. We spent most of lockdown doing the gardening. A bit of baking, bit of cooking, of course, all those things. Garden's looking good. I'm desperate to get some shelves in my new office here, but of course I ordered all that when then lockdown happened, so hopefully they will come soon. I also write in a lot of books about a fictitious village called Trevey. Trevey is a fishing village, and then there's another village called Pendragon, which is slightly inland. And I've lived in lots of Cornish villages, so Pendragon is a mix of those. Trevey, being on the coast with the fishing and the harbour there, is made up. That's a composite, probably, of Padstow and certainly Port Isaac, bit of Newquay, bit of St Agnes, all of those sort of places. But I have to make it up because if I was actually writing about Padstow and I wanted to write about, I don't know, a theatre or a cinema there isn't one anymore. So I have to make it up, and so that's why I've made that's why I've made it up. Um, how? Oh yes, this is a good question. How would Clara, the character inspired by my grandmother in the book, how would Clara and her daughter and granddaughter, Caroline and Hannah, have coped with lockdown? Well, now these are three women of three generations. Clara had Hannah and Hannah has Caroline. So we go through three generations in the book. They are very alpha females, and they would have probably got on each other's nerves while trying desperately to be nice and doing it properly. And it's funny because I'm in lockdown here with my two daughters. My sons, one of them is in London, one of them is teaching on the south coast. But my girls are here because they've been working. They came down last summer with me to work in restaurants to get some holiday work, and now they're locked down. And it's very interesting with two daughters, one nearly 19, one 23, and they are also alpha females. But we've had a few border skirmishes, but we're managing all right. Um, do you miss characters once you finish the book? Yes, I do. I miss characters very much, and a lot of them in previous books have have appeared again in a sequel. Uh, all the books you can read as standalone, they're fine, but you will find characters popping up here and there because I like them. There are some who are brilliant. I really, really like them. One's called Queenie, who runs the village shop in Pendragon, and she knows everything, and she bakes her own pasties. And yeah, Queenie's great. She's 110. She's doing very well. She's still alive. She's still with us. Couldn't kill her off. He said, I just can't. She's going to have to keep going forever, like the Queen. Will I use lockdown as a background to any of my future stories? I don't think we will get a perspective on lockdown for a long time. So I don't think I'll be able to do that just now. Oh, I'm getting some nice messages. Hello, Linda Tunnicliffe. Oh, I nearly knocked us out then. No, hang on. I nearly took us off air. Sorry about that. Hello, Linda. From the north. Hello, Anne Fields. Hello, Angie Plant. Hello, Fiona Gardner. Carrie Morris. Oh, this is lovely. Sue Lake. Gina. Nick. That's an Irish name. I'm sorry. Fionley. Shall I say Fionley? Anyway, you're in Dublin. Hello, Dublin. We love Dublin. Gorgeous place. Oh, yes, we took Calendar Girls to Dublin. Last year I did a tour of Calendar Girls, the musical, which was written by Gary Barlow. And it was an incredible time. I mean, I thought, I'm one for a challenge, and I thought, well, you're 62, get out on the road and go and enjoy it. It was fantastic. And we played in Dublin, and what a city. We were at, what's it called? Something, gosh. I should remember, shouldn't I? I'm so sorry. You'll be shouting it at me now. Beautiful theatre. Absolutely beautiful theatre. Who else have I got? Angie Plant on the Isle of Skye. This is so nice of you all. This, as you know, is all done via... I must just make sure that I get this absolutely right. At home with 4 indies. And the 4 indie bookshops, I suppose you know this, are Billingham's in the Wirral. That's owned by Sue. Hi, Sue. Also Booker in Oswestry, who is Carrie runs that. Carrie, thank you. Hello. Emma from Bookish in Crickhowell, and Emma's very cleverly put me on to Facebook because I couldn't have done it otherwise. We're doing all these things. Well, I don't really understand it. I missed out somebody there? Oh, Forum Books. Yes, Helen in Forum Books. We love our independent bookshops, and they're very important. So I know anybody who loves books will be supporting their local bookshops, but we've got to do that to keep them going, because where else can you go in and sit and chat and browse? It's all very well. I mean, Amazon is great, whatever, but browsing in a small bookshop, the smell of it, and the people behind the counter always, they know their stock and they can talk to you, and you go, could I have something that's a bit like, or have you got, oh, I don't know what it's called. I think it's got a man's name in the title, and they will find it for you, won't they? Who else is coming in? Oh, Jeannie, thank you. You seem to have read Daughters of Cornwall. You say it's fantastic. I appreciate that very much indeed. Hi, Kaz. Um, Dawn. Hi, Fern. Dawn Highland. Love your books. Got my copy and started reading this morning. Oh, good. Oh, good. Because they were being delivered this morning. Some of them apparently were a bit delayed. Terrible. And oh, by the way, I did read it as well on audiobook. That was fun in lockdown. Sitting in an incredible studio on the cliffs in Cornwall, about 40 minutes from here, at a place, a village called St Agnes, and the old tin mine there. Some of the old tin mines have crumbled and gone, but there are some still where you see the chimneys and the wheelhouse, and it was one of those that's been converted and has lovely things there. There's a restaurant and there's surfers against sewage. These are important things because there's a lot of surfing down here, but also this lovely recording studio where I sat and did that. So thank you everybody there as well. Sue Lake, Donna Barry. Donna Barry's a great friend of mine. Hi Donna, thank you very much. Jackie Blasland. Now this is fun. These are the girls I go cycling with. We've cycled the world together. Thank you, Jackie. I'm definitely going to have a glass of wine in a minute. Bernie McDonald Wilson. Hi Fern, I read you have moved to Cornwall. Yes, I have moved to Cornwall and have a very happy life there. I love your wallpaper behind you. It's nice, isn't it? Yes. I bought it thinking it might be a bit too much, but hey, it's lovely. And the cat likes it. He's here, he's fast asleep. If I turn you to this, my cat normally, can you just see him there by the books? He's called Bob, of course. And he usually walks across the laptop and sometimes writes whole chapters rather brilliantly, much better than me. Lorraine Stanton. Hi, Lorraine. Oh, you're all so sweet. This is lovely to see friends and new friends coming up on there. Books that I would suggest, by the way, if you are into reading. Oops, just dropped that on the floor. I'm so professional. Excuse me. I am wearing trousers. I almost wasn't, but then I thought, no, I better put something on the bottom, just in case. Yes, books I would recommend about Cornwall and written in Cornwall. Of course, Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. Lots of you must have read that as time goes by, but it's a book that you can read again and see different things in it. I love it. I really love it. Another one of Daphne du Maurier's I like, which I haven't got a copy of at the moment. It's called House on the Strand, which I really recommend. It's written probably in the 40s or 50s, but anyway, present day when she was writing it. And it's about a man who is a scientist and he makes up a potion and drinks it and goes back in time and backwards and forwards. It's really good. Not sci-fi. I don't really like sci-fi, but it's kind of history going backwards and forwards. Very good. And then my all-time favourite has to be Rosamund Pilcher's The Shell Seekers. There we go. It's just such a beautiful book. I'm very much inspired by writers like Rosamund Pilcher, definitely Jilly Cooper, people like that who write stories about intricate lives and interesting characters. I love that book. I did write to Rosamund Pilcher a couple of years ago and had a sweet letter back. It was typed, I think, by her assistant, secretary, maybe a relative, but beautifully typed, and she managed to sign it on the bottom. But what a writer she was. And this is a new one. Liz Fennick, who lives in Cornwall as well, writes lovely books. This is her newest one. It's called The Path to the Sea. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. And she's called the Queen of the Contemporary Cornish Novel. and the Guardian said that about her, so that's blooming good. I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little bit jealous about that, but one day I might get a bit of that on my books. Who else have I got here? At Home with Folks. Remember, you can order this book. Yes, thank you very much. This is, of course, the website that we're talking on now. Saying, folks, remember, you can order this book from all indie bookshops, especially Lingham's. Oh, she's shot over the page now. Anyway, you know what you... Oh, I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at somewhere else then. This is somebody from Minnesota. My goodness, somebody from Minnesota is in. Hello, Ireland, book ordered. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Kay. Hello, Marion. Marion, you're bringing back so many memories of the childhood in 60s holidays. Exactly. Am I writing a new book now, says Tina Edwards. Yes, I'm researching now. And it won't be set in Cornwall because I've got an idea for a story that is an historic story in the 19th century. No, that's not right. The 20th century. We're in the 21st, aren't we? The 20th century. And I'm researching for it now, and I'm very excited about it. So that's the one I'm going to write. Natalie Rogers says, thanks for the escape to Cornwall I've had through your books in these uncertain times. Reminds me of our annual trips to Porthcothan. Porthcothan Beach is a beautiful beach up on the north coast of Cornwall. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've spent a bit of time in St Ives, says Kay Ellen. I am a potter. Brilliant. I did pottery at school. I'm not as good. My son is an artist. He's a very good potter. Sarah Foster, hello. Sarah Walters loves the books. And my uncle, who is 95, was a friend of your dad's during the war. How incredible. Sarah, I'd be very interested in that. Perhaps you could find me on Twitter and let me know. My father died at Christmas. He was 95. He would have been 95 yesterday. Amazing, isn't it? But he died at Christmas. So I'm very interested in those things. Phil Davis says, do you think Cornwall has adopted you? Well, I'd like to think so. That would be very nice. I must say, people are very nice to me here, and they know how much I love it. So I think I'm starting to be accepted. Sally Miner, hi Fern, Sarah Foster, Joe Corbett from the Yorkshire Dales. Gorgeous Yorkshire Dales. Nikki Trout, love Calendar Girls. We did. Fiona Gardner, saw you in Calendar Girls in Dartford. Loved it. Did you love me though? I'm not sure my performance was. I don't know. You never, imposter syndrome. I have that, a lot of that. Jan Langley, hello from Shropshire. Damon Standing, good evening, Fern. Superb to meet you in Norwich last year. I can't say Norwich without remembering that joke. It's you put it on the back of an envelope. NORWICH, which means nick us off ready when I come home. Anyway, let's not go there. Natalie says the book's arriving tomorrow. Lingham's Booksellers. Well done, Lingham's Booksellers. Another indie, brilliant. Linda Fowler says, I look so well. I've been up since the crack of dawn. I had to put my makeup on really early. I've had to layer it up all day. Don't look too closely. I'm hoping this picture's a bit fuzzy. I'm better fuzzy. Listen, this is fun. What time is it now? I am about to wrap up because I think you've almost had enough about me. Judith Graham, found you at last. Happy publication day from Watford. Watford. I used to have a Saturday job in Watford in a shop. It sold records and clothes. And this was about 1974. So it was a very cool shop. Booker in Ozer Street are fabulous. They are, Nikki. Yes, they are. Jeanette Bob Berry. Not read any of your books, but will do now. Jeanette, thank you. Give them a whirl. Nothing better than a bookshop. All of these lovely people. Thank you so much. I think I've really have done enough talking. So what I'm going to say to you is thank you for spending the time to tune in. I appreciate it very much. I'm sorry if I've bored you senseless, but at least you'll be able to sleep well tonight. I'm going to go and get myself a little glass of champagne and a bit of pizza with my daughters and just send this book off on its merry journey. Fingers crossed that it does well. There we are, Fern, Britton, Daughters of Cornwall. I love it. I love this cover. Do you think I'd be good on QVC? Is it QVC? I could do this, couldn't I? That's another job. Thank you. God bless. I hope you stay safe in lockdown and nobody go mad. Just everybody be sensible and looking forward to seeing you on the other side. And if you come to Cornwall and I bump into you, please come and say hello. It would be lovely to meet you. No problem at all. So take care. Thank you. Bye. Bing.